morning. Thank you for joining us for Bible study tonight. We apologize for the late start, but we're grateful that you still decided to join. So before we go ahead and get started, we're going to have a quick song selection from Dee, our praise and worship leader. Gather in His name to worship Him. We have come into this house, gathered in His name to worship Him. Gathered in His name to worship Christ our Lord. Oh, worship Him. Worship Christ our Lord. Come on, just put your hands all over the building. Gathered in His name to worship Him. We have come into this house, gathered in His name to worship Him. We have come into this house and gathered in His name to worship Christ our Lord. Oh, worship Him. Worship Christ our Lord. Oh, we have come into this house and gathered in His name to worship Him. We have right now we're gonna have Sister Shannon lead us in a word of prayer.
Lord, we thank you for allowing us to come to your presence one more time, God. We thank you for allowing us to be in your sanctuary once more, God. We thank you for blessing us, God. We thank you for keeping us, Lord. We thank you for letting your angels be camped around us, Lord. That no hurt, harm, or danger come upon us or our children, God, our households, our families, Lord. We thank you, God, for this day, for allowing us to come to be in Bible study to learn more about your word, God. We ask you just to bless our teacher, God. Continue to keep your hands upon her, God. Bless our pastor, God. Bless our co-pastor, God. Continue to watch over the Ark of the Covenant, Lord Jesus. We ask you just to bless everyone that is in the building, Lord. That if anyone's not feeling well, God, anyone that has any burdens that they need to be cast to you, God, we ask you just to bless them, God. Lift the heavy burden, God. Lift the load off their shoulders, God. We ask you just to bless us, God, that we'll be able to continue this week, God. And we'll be able to go forth until we meet again, Lord. All these things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. And I'm going to read the scripture. Psalms 91. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress. My God, in Him will I trust. Surely He shall deliver thee from the snare of the fowler and from the noisome pestilence. He shall cover thee with thy feathers, and under His wings thou shalt trust. His truth shall be thy shield and thy buckler. May God add a blessing to the reading of His word.
Amen. We're going to go ahead and get into the word tonight. As you guys know that we have been studying out of Psalms. The last time we was here, we finished up, I believe we finished up chapter 6. So tonight we'll be getting into chapter 7. I'm going to read it out of the New King James Version, but I'll be going back and forth primarily between the New Living Translation because that is what my study Bible is in. So, in the New King James Version, it reads, O Lord my God, in you I put my trust. Save me from all those who persecute me, and deliver me, lest they tear me like a lion, rending me in pieces while there is none to deliver. O Lord my God, if I have done this, if there is iniquity in my hands, if I have repaid evil to him who was at peace with me, or have plundered my enemy without cause, let the enemy pursue me and overtake me. Yes, let him trample my life to the earth and lay my honor in the dust. Selah. Arise, O Lord, in your anger. Lift yourself up because of the rage of my enemies. Rise up for me to the judgment you have commanded. So the congregation of the people shall surround you for their sakes. Therefore, return on high. The Lord shall judge the peoples. Judge me, O Lord, according to my righteousness, and according to my integrity within me. Oh, let the wickedness of the wicked come to an end, and establish the just. For the righteous God tests the hearts and minds. My defense is of God, who serves the upright in heart. God is a just judge, and God is angry with the wicked every day. If he does not turn back, he will sharpen his sword, he bends his bow, and makes it ready. He also prepares for himself instruments of death. He makes his arrows into fiery shafts. Behold, the wicked brings forth iniquity. Yes, he conceives trouble and brings forth falsehood. He made a pit and dug it out, and has fallen into the ditch which he made. His trouble shall return upon his own head, and his violent dealing shall come down on his own crown. I will praise the Lord according to his righteousness, and I will sing praise to the name of the Lord Most High. So, I wanted to break this down kind of like verse by verse here. So, this was a psalm that David had wrote and concerned. It was some person who was a Benjamite, and from the sound of it, it sounds like they were somebody who he was afraid of, essentially. And so this is the song that he writes. Now, the thing we know from chapter 6 is that David had wrote that psalm as a way to ask God for mercy and as a way to kind of come to him to let him know that, I recognize that I have done some things wrong, and, I'm asking you for forgiveness, but I'm also, relying on you to be my strength. I'm relying on you to, be the enforcer in my life. And we kind of see that carry on into chapter 7. So, getting into this first verse, David is asking God for protection, and he's saying that he wanted, or he's asking God, to protect him from his persecutors, protect him from the people that he was worried about doing harm. So something that I thought was important to take from this is that the first thing that actually, we go back. He says, "Oh Lord, I put my trust in you." So the first thing we have to be able to recognize is who we put our trust in. David knew that his trust should be in God, and so therefore, that was the one thing that he wanted to acknowledge, is that I'm not looking towards anybody else to save me from the situation. I'm not expecting anyone else to do anything for me, but I'm coming to you to be, to be the person that I need over my life. So the first thing that we need to recognize is whether or not we are putting our trust in God. Now, when I was studying on this, one of the things that I got is that trust is a bold, confident, sure security or action based on that security. So basically, trust and faith are two different things. So faith is something that we have been given by God. We are promised peace through our trust. So faith is the thing that God gives us. Trust is the side effect to that faith. Trust is the thing that we build based on that faith. So when we have that faith in God and we grow that faith in Him, then the more faith that we have in Him, then we begin to build that trust. If I'm believing in the things that He can do for me and the things that He said that He can do in general, if I'm just believing in that, then I'm also going to trust in Him or have that same belief and confidence in Him that this is something that He will do. So faith is the thing that God gives us, but then trust is the thing that we build on our own. So in the examples of our own personal lives, you build a relationship with somebody, a friendship, family member or whatever, you have to trust them. You have to be willing, or you want to trust them. You want to be in a position where you feel like, they are reliable, that if you call on them for something, that they will, follow through with it, that if you need something from them, they're going to be there for you, you can trust them with your secrets, things like that. So faith is the thing that you are just trying to have in general. That's the thing that I'm not totally sure of yet, because that hasn't been confirmed for me. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things unseen. And so faith is that thing that we aren't totally sure of. We're not totally, confident on whether or not this thing can be happening. But the trust is being able to know that, okay, I've seen you do it before. I've seen it happen before, and so therefore I'm going to trust that you can continue, that you're going to be consistent in this thing, that you're going to follow through in the thing that, I have seen you do. So I've seen you be honest, so therefore I'm going to trust that you're going to continue being honest. I've seen you be faithful, so therefore I'm going to trust that you can continue to be faithful. That is the thing that we build off of our faith. So in regards to God, we cannot have trust in God if we do not have faith in Him.
Yeah.
That is the biggest part. So when we're realizing that our trust is lacking, then we have to go back and question our faith. Where is our faith in God? Are we really truly believing that He is who He said He is, and that He can do what He said that He can do? Or, are we just kind of going with the flow here and hoping, to see whatever happens? So our trust is built upon our faith, and we have to make sure that we are constantly checking whether or not our faith is growing daily, or if it's being diminished by our own worries, concerns, things that we see in life. Is our faith being diminished, or, is it constantly growing? Because He gives each of us a measure of faith. So it's up to us to grow that, and in growing that, we can grow our trust. So your trust is not built unless your faith is sturdy. Faith is the foundation, and then trust is kind of the thing that is built on top of that. So in Proverbs, hold on, my notes, I'm sorry. In Isaiah 26, chapter 26, verse 3, he says, he will keep you in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on you because he trusts in you. So God promised us peace because of our trust. And when he knows that we trust in him, then he is going to give us that peace. He knows that, that faith and trust is in him, that confidence and that certainty is in him. So therefore, he's going to grant us that peace. Also in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5, it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. So that's another piece of it to know and understand that we must always trust in God. And that part of that piece of it is not believing or not having that certainty within ourselves. Not having that certainty in our own ability, because one, we should know that that ability is not, it doesn't come from anything other than God, right? We are not strong on our own. We are not wise on our own. We are not capable of doing anything that we do on our own. So we ought not to put our own trust in ourselves. Never think that highly of yourself, to think that you are capable of doing something that, God has not instilled in you, or, incapable of doing something that he has instilled in you. So that trust should be totally in God and not in ourselves. So when you trust in God, you believe in what you ask for. So, just repeating what I was saying before about making sure that we are having that certainty. I'm trying to define the word without using the word. But having that certainty in God and knowing that he's capable of being able to do what he said he was going to do. And so the first thing we need to recognize and check within ourselves when we come to him is, where's my faith? Where's my trust? Am I fully believing in you? And do I fully have that certainty in you that what I'm about to ask for or what I'm about to pray for is something that I know you can answer? Because if we don't believe that, then the prayer is kind of like null and void at that point, because I'm not even believing that God can do it. So check your faith, check your trust. Are you really believing that God can do these things and that he will before you even request it from him? So then David goes into save me from all those who persecute me and deliver me. So he acknowledges first that he's put his trust into God. And then we kind of see the reason why he's putting that trust into God. He needs protection. David is looking for protection from his enemies. He's looking for protection from those who he feels have come to harm him. If I go back here, so Cush was named after Noah's grandson, and who was Ham's son, and it was the people of Cush were known for their military power and wealth. And so to feel like he needed protection from that, after knowing that, you would know that, this was a group that was really powerful. This was somebody that was worth being afraid of. If they come from a lot of power and wealth, when you have power and money, you pretty much control a lot. So David first acknowledges his trust in God, and then he's recognizing, or he's showing you why he's putting that trust in God. He needed protection. He needed a covering. And we should know that that protection and covering is first coming from God, that he is the one that we should be looking towards in order to get that. So he's asking God for this protection and this covering, and knowing that he's the person that he can come to when he is in need. And that is the same response and reaction that we had, or that we should have with God, knowing that he can protect us and that he is that covering over us to make sure that we are okay, no matter where we are, no matter what we are doing, and whatever circumstance that we may be in, that God is that covering, he's that protection. So when you analyze that trust and that faith that you have, then you can recognize this is why I'm trusting in you, because these are the things that I need. I need you to cover me. I need you to protect me. I need you to keep me safe from, all harm. And so David is acknowledging that. When we get into verse 3, he says, "Oh Lord, my God, if I have done any wrong," and I'm reading this out of the New Living Translation, "if I have done any wrong or am guilty of injustice, if I have betrayed a friend or plundered my enemy without cause, then let my enemies capture me. Let them trample me into the ground and drag my honor in the dust." And so this is where David is expecting for God to incite justice, basically. This is where he's asking for God for justice. And so, sorry, I'm trying to read my notes here. In Romans chapter, hold on, I'm moving too fast. Yeah. Okay, sorry. So, I'm sorry. Okay, so he was looking for God to perform justice, basically. And the thing that I found was interesting here is that David basically asked God, if I have done anything wrong, then let them do whatever it is that they need to do to me. And how many of us would actually say that? How many of us would actually put ourselves on the front line and say, you know what, I'm guilty, go ahead, do what you gotta do.
Right.
Most people would not say that. You probably, what they say, throw the rock and hide your hand. You know what I mean? Most people would try to kind of like stay in the back, like, And we see, what I thought was kind of interesting is in chapter 6, David tells God, don't deal with me in your anger. Right. But then in chapter 7, he's saying, well, you know what, if I did anything wrong, then let them do whatever it is that they've come to do. And I just thought that was a very interesting transition, how he goes from one end saying, don't deal with me in your anger, but then on the other end saying, do whatever it is you got to do in order to teach me the lesson that I need to learn. So to me, it showed, I guess, kind of like a growth in David being able to see that, no, I don't want you to come to me, in this negative way, but at the same time, I realized that I can't ask you to be just to other people and not expect that same type of justice to myself. Right. So, if there's anything that I have done wrong, if there's any wrong that I have committed to anyone else, then I'm willing to accept the consequences of my actions, and I'm willing, to be accountable for the things that I have done wrong. And I just think that that's very interesting how David goes through this kind of like growth period and how we read it in a very quick moment, because at one point he's telling God, I don't want you to deal with me in your anger. I don't want you to deal with me out of your wrath. But then now he's switching and recognizing this accountability. I can't necessarily tell God how to handle me. I have to be able to be willing to accept whatever consequences that he gives me because of the actions that I have had. And so he's now kind of like, I don't want to say sacrificing himself, but putting himself out there. I recognize my wrongs and I realize that those are going to have consequences to them, and I have to be held accountable in the same way that I want these other people to be held accountable. And so if this is what has to happen in order for me to learn my lessons, then I'm willing to accept. And that's a harsh reality to come to. We sometimes are willing to do the dirt, but we don't really want to pay the consequences, And for David to be able to come to that own awareness within himself, to recognize that his actions were going to have consequences, and he had to accept whatever that was definitely a growth and mature thing for him to do, and a good place for him to come to. And I also think kind of like a place of humility, almost, of being able to see that he's not above anybody else. You know what I mean? That God doesn't, he doesn't treat anyone any better or worse than the other. You know what I mean? He's fair, he's just. And so, that's where I was trying to get to. I'm sorry, y'all. I was all over the place for a second there. So, in Romans 12:3, and I'm actually going to read that one. I did not write the whole thing down. So in Romans 12:3, it says, "For I say, through the grace given to me, to everyone who is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly as God has dealt to each one a measure of faith."
Right.
And so this is going back to the point that I was making about David kind of having this self-awareness moment within himself. He's not any better than the people that he's asking God for protection from. You know what I mean? It doesn't, just because he may be a righteous man, he may be a man after God's heart, but that does not make him, because he has committed a sin, that does not make him any better than the people that he was asking for protection from. So yes, he was in need of protection. That doesn't change that. However, he was still a sinner. He was still someone who had committed a crime, an issue, by going after Bathsheba and her husband. And so David has this self-awareness moment with himself. I'm not any better than these other people. And so how can I expect God to give me justice and protection from the people that I needed justice and protection from? But then the people who needed justice and protection from me, I want to be separate from that. Bathsheba lost her husband, you know what I mean? And now she has to become David's wife because that's what he wanted. And so the person and people who needed protection from David didn't get that, but yet David wants protection from these other people, you know what I mean? So he had to take this moment and recognize within himself, I am just as wrong, and so therefore the same thing that I'm asking for, I have to be willing to accept. In Proverbs 13:16, it says here, every prudent man acts with knowledge, but a fool lays open its folly. And so in the New Living Translation, it reads, "Wise people think before they act, fools don't, and even brag about their foolishness." So kind of getting into the understanding of the difference between a person who uses wisdom and a person who doesn't. A person who uses wisdom is going to think about the actions and the consequences before they act on them. They're not going to just act rashly. They're not going to just do things out of haste or impulsively. That's what I was correct. They're not going to do things impulsively. A lot of times you're going to be a little more thought-provoking when you make your decisions. How does this not only affect me, but the people who are around me? And so a person who is not being wise is obviously just going to do whatever, and sometimes will be a little braggadocious about it, not recognizing that they are harming other people, not even just themselves, but that they are harming other people and that they are causing danger to other people. People who are not wise don't necessarily care about that. They're not really thinking about how their actions can affect other people. And so that was something that I thought was necessary for us to keep in mind, is that we have to be careful how we do things and what we do, and making sure that we are being more, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Like slow in how we respond. We need to be quick. Be quick to hear and slow to speak. And that, I believe, also leads into our actions as well, that we can't always react so quickly to things. We always want to respond immediately, and just, especially when you're angry, you're like, I'm ready to get everything out right now. I'm mad, I want to release it. But sometimes in that anger, you say things, you do things that, can be a little more harmful. And so you have to be a little more careful about what you say in those moments, how you respond, whether or not you want to respond right now. I think I remember Bishop T.D. Jakes said this, I heard a while ago, that when he would get a message from somebody that was like a little angry or whatever, he would give himself at least 30 minutes before he would respond. And the reason why he would do that was because it would give him a moment to really process whatever was said to him, and then so that he can actually process before he responded back. And that was to allow him to not say anything crazy, first of all, that, maybe he shouldn't have said, but then to also make sure that the points that he really wanted to focus on, whatever message or purpose of that conversation that he really wanted to focus on, he can actually think about it. A lot of times you get into an argument with somebody and then afterwards you're like, I missed that. Like, I could have said this, and I could have said that, and I could have focused on this, or whatever. Right. And, you kind of, then it's like you want to go back and start the argument all over, just so you can get them other points off. So, not to, say that I condone being combative, but, sometimes you have to give yourself time to be able to process things and recognize what it is that you're really frustrated about. One of my friends, she does that a lot of times where she like makes me do it sometimes too, because I'll be like talking about something like, this is making me mad, this is making me mad. And she'd be like, okay, but what are you actually angry about? And I'm like, I just said this. Like, no, because I know you don't actually care about that. What is it that you are actually angry about? And then the more that I'm talking, she'd be like, okay, that's what you're mad about. It's not about what this happened, it's actually because of this. And so when you give yourself time to respond, you allow yourself to be able to figure out what the actual problem is, what the actual issue is, and respond more in grace rather than, in frustration, in negativity, you allow yourself to actually be able to come to this person a little more seasoned, season your words with grace. You come to this person a little more seasoned than you would have if you had just reacted naturally. Amen. Also, in Proverbs 14 and 16, it says, the wise are cautious and avoid danger. Fools plunge ahead with reckless confidence. And so this is also tagging into that point of when you're using wisdom, you know how to navigate certain situations. I don't put myself in certain situations that I know are going to cause me to want to be combative or to want to be, or get frustrated. I don't want to put myself in certain conversations that I know are going to rile me up, because I want to make sure that I can keep the composure that I want to maintain, that I can keep the peace that I want to maintain, and I don't allow myself to be in certain situations among certain people, around certain crowds, doing certain things that I know are going to bring out a certain reaction out of me that I don't want to get into. And so I might be a little more cautious about who I spend my time with, the conversations that I allow myself to be engaged in, the places that you go to, and the types of people, that are going to be there, whether or not this is going to bring out a certain reaction out of you. You got to be careful. You know what I mean? You got to be careful, especially when you're trying to live a righteous life. You're trying to live a life, close to God. You have to be careful with not even just temptation, but not necessarily where you out here doing crazy things, but just I don't want to put myself in a position where it's going to cause me to act out of a character that I don't want to express. I'm trying to get out of the habit of saying it's not my character, because I feel like if you can show it, then I'm gonna be there. But you don't want to be in situations that are gonna cause you to be in a character that you don't want to express.
I have a question. How do we reach the generation in which you guys are in now to make them understand that? Because this generation now that I see coming up tend to often knee-jerk reaction. So how do you get them to understand how to apply wisdom to their lives, that they don't make these knee-jerk decisions?
That's a good question. I feel like, okay, so I think that part of it goes by being an example. One of the things that I think, the most influential things that we can do to anybody is just be the example. If people can see that somebody who they look up to is behaving or not behaving in a way that they're not used to, that's not normal to them, then maybe it'll kind of cause them to look at things differently. I remember being at work I work at a group home, and there's one of the individuals, like when he gets upset, like there's really no calming him down, and a lot of people will kind of feed off of it and get mad too. And in the beginning, I used to do that, like get a little frustrated, and then after a while, I realized if you just let him talk long enough, like he might cuss me out, call me all types of names. If you let him talk long enough, eventually he'll just get quiet and walk away. So he got into an argument with me one day about something silly. And I'm like, okay, are you done? Are you done? Are you done? Well, I can't have a conversation if you're yelling at me. And I just was like, calm like that. And eventually, like, he just looked at me like, why are you yelling at me? Like, why are you responding back? And he just got quiet and he stormed off from his room. And so one of my coworkers was like, I want to be like you when I grow up. Because her natural reaction, and a lot of people in the house, and it was something that I had to learn, was to argue back with him. Because, you know, we thinking, you know better. So it shouldn't be that hard. And he really didn't, but... but it was just like, you know, eventually I had to learn this does not solve the problem. It only makes me more upset, more frustrated, and it causes the situation to become worse. And so therefore I learned how to handle the situation differently, and it kind of caused her to be like, okay, you know what, let me try your method next time, because clearly this isn't working for me either. So I'll get quiet on him. I'll, you know, respond differently so that it doesn't, you know, bring that type of reaction. So I think one of the first things that we can do is definitely be the example and be the influence. But this younger generation is something else. It's something else. And so this might not be the best answer, but my other response to that is that they might have to learn on their own that response does not always bring you the reaction and outcome that you want. You know, I used to have the same conversation with my niece all the time because she would be fighting in school, and I'm like, you're gonna fight your whole entire life if you fight everybody that makes you upset. Like, you're gonna literally every day for the rest of your life you're gonna be fighting because somebody made you mad. Like, it's not worth it. You know what I mean? It's not worth it. And I had to make a bet with her, honestly, to get her to stop fighting. Like, if you don't fight for the rest of the school year, I'll give you some money. And she literally told me one time, the only reason why I didn't hit her was because I told you I wasn't gonna do it. And I was like, well, if that's what got you, then I guess it worked, you know? But this younger generation, I don't know, they a little different, and they you know, they like to do what they want to do and feel like, you know, I feel like when I was growing up, we had that hard-headed mentality, but I think it was usually like after a little while, you kind of learn, like, okay, that don't work, like, gotta stop doing that, you know. Whereas the younger generation, I think when they reach about like 14, it's like they think they got every answer in the world, and you can't really tell them. So unfortunately, I think for some of those kids, it's gonna end up having to take the hard way for them to finally learn that lesson. But for every adult or influence in their life that's around them, I still think that the best thing that you can do is be that influence, because if they can see that what you're doing is working for you and is actually producing the type of results that they want to see, they can't argue facts. You know what I mean? You can't argue that this is working because you see it works every time, or, you know, most of the time when I do this, I'm not, you know, responding to anger. I keep my own peace. You know what I mean? Like, that's the big thing. I have peace in my life because I'm not doing what you do. I'm not responding in the way that you respond, and so therefore I can sleep great at night. I can walk away from this conversation and not even like be fazed about it because I didn't let myself get worked up. So I think once they can see that more frequently, because I think part of the issue is that they don't see enough people doing the things that they should be doing.
Amen.
And so because there's too many people that are also reacting in the same way, like I've seen teachers or heard teachers talk about how they've had children misbehave in school and they call the parents, and then the parents come up there and start yelling at the teacher. Like, well, of course, you know, the child's going to think that that's okay because they know their parent going to come up there and do exactly what they was doing.
Right.
Whereas when you have that parent that's going to, you know, get at them when they get to school, you already know, I'm going to call your mom, they straight up because they already know if mom come up here, it's a whole different situation. So when you can be that example, be that influence to some kids, I think even if it it's not always like an instant or immediate reaction or change. I think they always keep that in mind. Like, so-and-so told me to stop doing that. And I think eventually they'll meet other people who do and say the same thing and be like, okay, you know, everybody's been telling you this. At some point, you gotta learn the lesson. Yes.
Well, I believe that, you know, the average person wants to be happy. And there's always somebody that's upset or angry. And you can't feed into that.
Right.
That's what the problem is. And when you argue with somebody, that's exactly what you're doing. You're feeding into it. So you've got to use a little bit of common sense with it and rise above that and be an example for the younger generation. If they see that you're happy, the people around you are happy, they're going to want to be happy. And I think that's what it's going to take to change the younger generation. You know, now the older generation that I'm from, it was a lot harder to change.
This goes back to something that I had talked about a few weeks ago. Ephesians 6 talks about we wrestle not against flesh and blood, right? And naturally, obviously, when you're in a conflict, a situation, a dangerous moment, whatever, most of the time a scripture is not popping up in your head. You know what I mean? You're probably thinking completely flesh, human, like most of the time, you know, God is not at the forefront of my thoughts. Just being honest. Yeah. But there's something that we do have to keep in mind, because a lot of everything that we go through in life that is against us is not against us personally. It's against the stuff that we don't want to come forth, right? We try to stop God's plan. And so if I get into an argument with somebody over something that I may think is silly, me arguing back with them is only part of his plan, because now you're getting me out of character. God forbid there's somebody who around that knows that I'm in the church, or you know, I'm a Christian or whatever, and now they see me out here acting crazy, you know what I mean? I'm put in a different image in their mind of who I am and who Christ is, and then it's taking me several steps back, because this anger part of me that I have to work on is now still an issue, because I haven't allowed myself to fix it. So no, we don't. We may not always naturally think of, you know, the word, or, you know, God may not be the first natural reaction, but we have to get into the habit of allowing that to at least come to our forethought. You know what I mean? This is not about me. It's about, you know, whatever it is. My mom is the reason why. Because she will always say that when I would complain about anything, she'd be like, it's not you, it's what's in you. That's what they're trying to get to. It's not you, it's what's in you.
Right.
And so it's literally the same thing for all of us. It's not us, it's what's in us. God has planted something in every single one of his children that he put on here. And so that was always going to do something to try to snatch that. And any little situation, like the smallest thing, can be the biggest problem and the biggest hindrance if we let it be.
Right.
And so the issue that I think, personal opinion here, issue that becomes the kind of like circle that we all keep going into is that is not something that we naturally think about. So if the adults are not learning that lesson, then the children are not learning that lesson, and then it just becomes this continuous cycle of everybody fighting the same demons, essentially, you know, the same spirits, because nobody's learning the lesson that it's not about you, it's about whatever it is that God has planted in you and in your family that he's trying to prevent from coming forth. So they have to be able to understand that it's not about you. It's not about whatever person you think that you are. It's about the thing that God has planted in you. And unfortunately, you know, as we continue, these generations are turning away more and more from Christ. And so I think that that's probably another part of the big issue, is that they don't have that foundation in God to be able to recognize that this is the problem. And so, you know, more problems arise.
Well, as you were talking there, one of the things, again, we live in a generation now that's it's a get back spirit. You know, what you done to me, I'm going to do it even more harsh to you.
Right.
So that's the time in which we're living in. God said, if any man lack wisdom, let him ask of God.
Right.
And I think this generation don't take time to ask for wisdom sometimes.
Right.
So we need to learn how to ask for wisdom. You know, wisdom is the key principle to all things. You know, God can give you wisdom to solve problems. Just like when they came to Solomon, I believe it was, that the women, the two women that was laying in the bed, the one woman rolled on her child and killed the child. And the other one, the women, they woke up the next morning, and the other one that killed her child tried to claim the other woman's child.
Right.
And so Solomon asked God to give him wisdom how to resolve this issue. And Solomon said, well, bring the child to me. I cut the child in half, and I give you half, and I give her half. And the woman that was truly the mother said, well, just take the baby and give it to her. He said, now this is the mother right here. So he gave the woman that offered her son, her child, to the other woman. Solomon said, well, this is the true mother here, because the other woman wasn't willing to, right. You know, so we need to begin to ask God for more wisdom, how to deal with certain things that may arise in our lives. But this generation, they don't ask for wisdom. They ask for wisdom. They simply try to find out ways and means how I can repay you for what you've done. You know, I'm going to get on social media and put you on blast. You know, so it's like it's always this war going on. And it goes back to what she was saying. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principality, against spiritual wickedness in high places. So there's a wickedness that is going on. And what the enemy is doing, he's trying to get our sons and our daughters, amen, to fight the natural rather than in the spirit. And when you fight the natural, that's when you lose both natural and spiritual. Because now you have damaged who you are as a person. And also now you're making people look at you differently. You also, you know, you have fought in the natural. People don't respect you in the same. So we got to make sure that as this generation is coming along, that they will also teach the next generation how to seek for wisdom, how to seek God's guidance, rather than my own emotions. Go back to the emotion you were saying. And David here, he didn't operate in his emotion. He simply told God, you know, if I've done anything wrong, I'm willing to pay the price for it. You know, I'm willing to suffer the consequences because I don't want to do anyone wrong. And like I said, that spoke volume to his stance with God, in his place with God. He understood that he was in a place of service, you know, of ruling as a king, but he also wanted to make sure that he did the right thing. You know, you can be an authority, but you still need to do the right thing. You know, and David was in a place of authority, but he still wanted to make sure he did the right thing. If I've done anyone wrong, you know, God forgive me. You know, don't hold this to my charge. You know, and if I have, you know, repay me for what I've done. I actually, many people ain't gonna ask God to pay them for what they've done wrong. We're gonna tell God cover it up, and we'll talk about it later. No, you know. So thank God for the wisdom that David has. Right? That shows wisdom, that shows insight that God gave him to be a great leader. You know, a great leader is willing to admit when they're wrong. All right, that's what a great leader becomes. Amen. To realize that, you know, if I've done wrong, I'm willing to suffer the consequences. God, show me my wrong and help me correct my wrong. So, but like I said, but we living in a generation now. You know, if they wrong, they don't care. You know, hey, it happened. They try to move on to the next place. But that same issue gonna follow you to the next circumstance that you may be in. And so, if you don't handle that right, you're gonna repeat the process. You're gonna repeat the test. And I know a lot of people don't like tests. So why not pass the test? God, give me the wisdom how to pass this. Give me the wisdom how to overcome this. Because right now I'm in a place, and it's not doing me any good being in this place if I'm harming myself and others at the same time. So I think a generation now, which they need to ask for wisdom, and I think they can find themselves coming out a lot better.
Amen. And I like that you bring up the point that he was a king, because it differentiates the difference between David and Saul. Because David was willing to look at himself and say, you know what, I recognize that I'm not the best person. I don't have everything together. I did, do some wrongs. And so I'm willing to acknowledge that problem. Whereas Saul was very, what's the word I'm looking for? It wasn't like that.
Prideful.
Yes, yeah, thank you, prideful. Saul didn't, he didn't really have that self-awareness within himself to recognize that he was a problem. And so much so that, you know, he was trying to kill David. You know what I mean? Like 2-3 times, I think he attempted to kill David. And so Saul, as a king, was not demonstrating the best form of leadership and the best example of what, you know, a humble person should be.
Right.
But David, even in his leadership, said, no, I'm not gonna, you know, look at myself as just because I'm this king that I'm above everybody else and that I don't deserve, you know, that same chastisement, you know, that I expect everyone else to get. And he was willing to humble himself in this moment and kind of change his thinking, where before, like I said, he was telling God, don't deal with me in your wrath. But now it's, you know what, I do realize maybe I do need to be dealt with. You know, I did do something wrong and I do deserve to have to deal with the consequences of that. And so it's something that we can take in with ourselves as well. That, and going back to that scripture about not thinking highly of yourself. It doesn't matter who you are, what your position is, what your name is, who your family is, where you come from. At the end of the day, you are still just a child or friend of God.
Yes.
And if you have done any type of wrong, if you have committed any type of issue, then you also have to deal with the consequences
Right.
of that issue. It does not, you know, you being who you are or whoever it is you think you are, does not take you away from that. And so something to keep in mind and to take from David, that humility piece, you know, to be able to recognize that, one, God is our Father. He is the person that we trust in, that we believe in, and that we hold our faith in. But yet, I also have to recognize that, like a father, he's going to treat me as a child, and he's going to do exactly what, you know, parents do with their kids. He's going to make sure that I'm corrected, and that, you know, anytime I do something wrong, he acknowledges it, because one, he wants me to be better. That's not the person that he created, so obviously he's not going to enable that behavior by allowing me to continue on that path and you know, in that mindset. So something to keep in mind. So we're going to stop here. I think we finished at verse 5, so we'll pick up next week. Pastor, so we thank you for joining us this evening. If you would like to sow into this ministry, you can give through Cash App, Giveify, or you can mail it in. We thank you for joining us and for all of your giving. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, which this is also now streaming to, and on our website, arcofcove.com. And we'll pray out and we'll end here. So, Lord, we thank you for this lesson today, God. We thank you for allowing us to be able to understand humility, for teaching us that our actions have consequences to them, God. We just ask that you will help us to think before we act, think before we speak, that we will use wisdom in our daily lives and in our daily actions and the things that we do, God, that you would just allow for us to rely on you to give us that wisdom so that we can respond in the way that you desire for us to respond, that we can remember that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but rulers and powers and dark places. So we just ask that you will help us to keep that in mind when we are going on about our day-to-day life, that the enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy, and any time that he gets that chance and opportunity, he will try. And so we have to make sure that we keep the armor of God on us at all times so that we can fight against him in Jesus' name.